Hey, this is RawTherapee Bonsai. Today we're looking at bracketing, taking multiple photos at different exposures, putting them together on the computer to get more dynamic range. I use the M50 for most of these examples. It's pretty easy to use, but Canon does kind of hide that feature for some reason in one of the info screens. So first off, let's take a look at finding that and using it on the camera. With Canon cameras, it's a little awkward to find the bracketing feature. They hide it. So there's a few things to take note of. Let's go into the menu and also go to the screen area, which shows what screens we want to display. Go into the screen info settings. I'm going to make sure that you have this one on. So in the case of the M50, it's number 5. Just make sure it's checked. If you don't, you won't even be able to get where you want to go. So from here, we want to use the info button. Go to this one, press set. That way we can get into the exposure comp area. Go in there with set. Now we're in the bracketing stuff. From here we can adjust the bracket size. 2 stops either way, maximum. So that's good to go. So now you can see it only took 1 photo. But you can see it's still bracketing. What you can do to avoid pressing the shutter 3 times is you go into set again. We go into this area, 2-second timer. At that point, you get the 2-second timer and then it'll take the 3 photos. So that way you don't get shake with the camera and it takes the 3 photos by itself. A nice feature of this setup with the M50 is that when you look through the viewfinder, you can see your scene, but then you can also have this back screen to adjust bracketing settings as you would like. So it's pretty convenient to compose things with the viewfinder and also adjust your bracket with the back screen. Of course, if you want to use the back screen, you just press the info button. You're still in the bracketing mode. You can take that photo. You can offset your bracket to get a full 9 photos in this case. So you go back to set, and then you use this top dial again to scroll it over to whatever you want, all the way up to plus or minus 5 stops. And then you can also go the opposite direction. Obviously, the negative here is that it takes more effort to get those 3 sets, and potentially things would change in the scene while you're doing that. When you want to turn your bracket off, you just go back to set again, go into the exposure comp, and turn that off. So you dial it down to 0, and then you're all set for a normal photo. So it depends on what you want to do, but that is bracketing on the M50. On a side note, you can use any mode on the M50 with bracketing. I just had in program mode for the example, but if you wanted to use manual, TV, AV, whatever, it'll work just fine as well. We're using 3 pieces of software to put the brackets together. One is Luminance HDR. It's pretty standard. It is open source and free. Also HDR Merge. This one's more unique. It takes multiple RAW files and makes a one large RAW file out of the group. It's pretty interesting. That's the one that I'm most fond of. But you need to have software that supports these large special RAW files of G format. And the only thing that I know of at the moment is RawTherapee, where the developer actually put support in there. So we're going to be looking at RawTherapee as well. Let's take a look at those 2 pieces of software and also RawTherapee. First off, let's just look at some of the photos. A bunch of DNGs that I converted from the CR3s of the M50. This is my first set. See, every bracket I went through and I grouped them by color, and I just kept going through the colors that I had available for each one. So for example, if we want to edit all the way up to 2232, this group here, easy enough, you just select all of them. You can check those boxes if you want to crop or align. So these are some of the options with bracketing stuff. We have HDRMerge. Simple enough. It's got all the 9 brackets, some adjustments here if you want to, and then there isn't too much else in this program, but at that point you want to either draw things out and fix the layers here or just save it as is. And then one thing to keep note of with HDRMerge is that there's a certain radius of blurring on the edges of things. I usually just put it into my file name so I know if it works well, I'll use that. So I'm going to do R. Let's do 7 pixels this time. So here's the mask blur radius, which is what I was talking about. I just put it to 7 so it's aligning with my file name. Here, bits per sample, I'll just do 32 so it's maximum. I don't know if there's a big benefit or not, but at that point it'll make that special DNG raw file. So we've got our file here and we have all the normal adjustments you'd have in a raw program. So that's what makes this one so interesting to use, is it has a lot more dynamic range due to all those frames, but it's basically a normal raw file. So here we can really adjust things. You can see the skies coming out nicely. So we take some contrast out just to get more dynamic range in this situation. There are definitely a lot of options in here. That can, shadows, highlights really can bring out some sky and such. So this one gives that really weird HDR look to it. I'm not a fan of this, but it's an option if you want to do that. So one of the issues that I see is in this area, it's got that color fringing really bad. So that could be part of the issue with the blur radius or whatever it was called, that I had to set to 7 in this case. So definitely a lot more dynamic range in this image than you can get usually with a single photo. That's the main goal. Let's look at the clouds real quick in here. See if there's any blurring. It looks like in this specific case it didn't work too poorly with blurring of clouds. Maybe I see some issues, but not too bad. So let's edit the same set with the other program. Right, we're in Luminance HDR, we're using the same photos just to get a comparison between the two options. Let's do auto align, auto crop just in case. Let's see if that makes a difference. So they're different profiles. I don't really know what they do. Different options, so many options. I'm sure with a lot of effort you can try different things out and see if it makes a difference for you or not. Let's use the first profile. I assume that's the general purpose one. From there we've got our image. We've got different options on the side here. I guess it's just a guesstimate of what you want as a starting point. Definitely don't want that one. This is a very standard application. The goal here is to adjust things in the program itself, and then eventually you can export to have that final TIFF or final whatever. And then from there you can actually adjust things further in some other application. Let's try this top one here, update. So this is going to be really time consuming. It's taking quite a while. Yeah, that's pretty extreme looking. So from there you can further select options. So it looks good enough, right? Yeah. And then from there we can just export our image. Open this one real quick. Let's look at the clouds. You can actually see there are double images of the clouds. I didn't notice that in as much in the DNG HDR Merge program, so here it is definitely more noticeable, especially this spot right there and that one. Let's quickly look through some of the other brackets I put together with HDR Merge program. This is in RawTherapee. I have a few different ones that I tried out. I think this was one of my first. You can see going in here we have some issue with the blurring of the edges. That was probably, let's see what I did there. I didn't even put how many, what the radius was on that one, but again, this would be challenging to deal with. Here with this image, we probably didn't really need to do an HDR photo, but in the clouds, I think it might have added a little bit more blue here, which is nice to have in some situations. If you can adjust things properly, it definitely gives you maybe slightly better skies and things when you don't have issues related to movement. I used 3 for the mask blur radius in this case, and you can still see there is some weird white edges to some of the trees. That could be a mixture of movement with wind or something, but also with the program and having able to adjust things properly, or maybe even go in there and draw edges. But with so many trees, that would be a huge, difficult, time-consuming task. I've been noticing some of the brackets that I put together with the HDRMerge option get this kind of red, purpley look to the shadows. It might be a mixture of just bad dynamic range or issues with noise and those brackets where it is taking a dark exposure, but there is a decent amount of detail. Let's try tone mapping again. But that actually is not too bad. It gives me a lot of detail in these shadows. So this situation, I remember it being very extreme with the bright areas versus the dark areas. So that's a big benefit of using a bracket in this situation. If you can adjust the color cast of this shadow, I could see it being really nice. Okay, so that's not too bad. Not too bad. There still is a green cast now. Let's see if I could somehow deal with that. Yeah. So in this specific situation, I could definitely see a benefit of using a bracket if you wanted to get that full range of dark and light areas with texture. Here is one bracket with the D750. You could see definitely a huge benefit to these windowed areas. I went there and adjusted things to make sure that it looks good. Let's look at the actual source images real quick for this one. 2716. Let's take a quick look at the actual images. Let's see, that one's got texture in there. If we go into here, that's fully blown out. So this one is probably where I would expose just for a single photo. You can see the windows are still completely blown out or very close to being blown out, mostly in those. But then we take it down and those have some texture. So we could potentially edit this to pull up the foreground. Let's just do a quick look. So we're able to get something similar, but not necessarily as good. Just look at some of the noise patterns on this one single image, and let's look at RawTherapee. So actually there is some issue here, at least with that. You can see there is some noise from using those other brackets. If you were to shorten the bracket and just use fewer photos, you probably wouldn't have as much issue with that noise showing up in there. But the exterior areas look really good. So it depends a lot on your skill with processing afterwards. Actually, these lights look very nice. So that is a smooth gradient there. That looks good. Let's look at this one here. Definitely nice blue skies. Some issues with chromatic aberration as usual. But you look down here and there's some blurring going on. So that motion is going to make an issue for any type of HDR image. This actually up here, this is kind of weird looking too. So there might have actually been some motion, but then it's also a factor of, I used R20 for the blurring of the edges, and that really makes it mix those pieces together. Out of the two pieces of software, I prefer the one that makes the DNG files. It's interesting, it's unique, and it makes one simple file that you can edit afterwards with RawTherapee. I think it's pretty challenging to get a good bracket that looks natural, but it also gives you a lot of dynamic range. Now it is a lot in the software, but also when you're taking the photos, you have to be mindful of how many stops of range you want, and if some of the files are going to have a lot of noise in them. With the house photos, if you do it well, and especially with the software side, you can get it somewhat natural looking and also get those windows not blown out, which is pretty important in some situations. Things to keep in mind is motion in your photos. If you have clouds in there, chances are your brackets aren't going to work too well. Maybe with the 3 simple brackets that are quick to take with the camera, it'll be fine, but you still might get a little bit of blurring depending on how fast the clouds are moving. Same thing for any type of motion in your photos. But as long as you choose your scene properly and take scenes that really need that dynamic range, there are a lot of situations where you really just don't need it. A lot of my one largest set of examples really didn't need the bracketing to make a nice photo. But some of them, like the house photos, could definitely use that bracketing to get those windows exposed properly and also I think the ones with nice, large, bright skies work well for bracketing, but then you have to be mindful of clouds and motion in your photos. So as I look at bracketing, mostly with the Canon EOS M50, it's pretty simple and easy to use. There are some quirks, of course, with you only get the 3 brackets initially, but you can offset that. It just takes a little bit more effort. Besides that, I think it's pretty solid. I don't know why Canon hides that feature so much in their info screen, but once you know where it is, it's easy to find and use. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'm Scott for Photography Bonsai. If you did enjoy the video, please consider subscribing. That helps me out a lot. Likes and shares help out a lot as well. Thanks again.